Our story begins in a bustling city that blends magic and technology. Right in front of a coffee shop called You Go In Inside, the prota serves a drink to a noble lady and friendly asks her to give it a try. He hands over the cup, thinking to himself that this drink is his absolute masterpiece. The girl notices that the beverage looks quite different from the regular coffee he usually serves. She doesn't really care what the drink is, thinking that even if it tastes delicious, nothing will change her plans. The young lady plans to make that arrogant commoner cry with her harsh criticism. But little does she know, the prota knows his stuff and is about to win over the waifu with some good food. Without wasting any time, she takes a sip of the drink. The young man watches her reaction closely, visibly tense and breaking into a cold sweat. Suddenly, the girl's eyes widen in sheer shock as she tastes the flavor. She lets out a gasp of amazement, completely blown away by the sensation. With her face turning bright red from excitement, she screams that this is unbelievable. Seeing her reaction, the young man flashes a highly confident smirk. She thinks to herself that she has never tasted anything like this in her life, wondering what on earth he just made her drink. Trembling slightly, she points at the cup and asks for the name of the beverage. She asks if it isn't coffee, and he replies that of course it isn't. As it is his newest masterpiece, he proudly announces that this drink will revolutionize Britannia's culinary culture. This prota is a sneaky one. He basically copied Coca-Cola. The story then flashes back 3 months in time, showing the majestic royal palace of Britannia. Two maids walk through the luxurious hallways of the palace, chatting excitedly. Suddenly they stop as they spot the prota looking out the window. He looks deep in thought, completely exhausted from all the hustle and bustle of his busy life. One of the maids is charmed upon realizing that the man standing there is Lord Hanbin. They are absolutely starstruck by the presence of Britannia's greatest hero. The two comment on how elegant he looks today, even if he seems a bit lean at first glance. But in reality, he is a legendary knight who defeated apocalyptic beasts on the front lines of the demon realm. Besides his immense strength, he is also a genius alchemist who has mastered the legendary and impossible art of material creation. As if that weren't enough, he also works as an inventor, urban planner, and the legal expert who rewrote the kingdom's laws. This guy is the ultimate jack of all trades. They are seriously overworking our prota. They admire how all of Britannia's peace comes from him, wondering how someone could be so perfect. A woman appears behind them, ironically pointing out that he was voted the most desirable man by the idle maids. Upon seeing who the woman is, the two maids quickly excuse themselves and run off. She tells him that he is terrifying for winning hearts like a pyramid scheme, and he simply greets her back. She formally introduces herself as Secretary Lily Fontaine, arriving to give her daily report to the minister. Hanbin simply couldn't take this hectic life anymore. Now holding the position of Minister of Internal Affairs, he has to deal with giant stacks of paperwork piled up on his desk. He knows everyone sees him as the hero who saved the kingdom, but there is a major secret behind all of this. In reality, he was just an ordinary Korean citizen who worked as a food development researcher in the modern world. That was before he suddenly fell into this fantasy world and went through extreme trials just to survive. After dedicating so much time to this new home, Hanbin feels he finally deserves to take a break. He has already submitted a request for a 1-week vacation and is ready to travel by train. All he wants is to start this trip as soon as possible to reach his own personal goals. I'm pretty sure he just wants to find a wife and retire to the countryside. That's every man's dream back to reality. Lily brings him a cup of coffee to drink while they review the pending matters. He looks down at the cup with a discouraged expression. She asks if there is something wrong with the drink, and he brushes it off, thanking her before they start discussing the day's topics, getting straight to the point. Lily warns him that Hanbin's vacation request was completely rejected. Poor prota, he really is becoming a corporate slave. The news is such a shock that the young man ends up spitting out all the coffee he was drinking. Outraged, Hanbin asks by whose authority she did that, and the secretary claims she has more than enough authority. She shyly says that she spends every night with him, prompting the young man to ask her not to talk about overtime in such an ambiguous way. He worries about the rumors that might spread in the palace, but she tells him not to worry about it. She happily states that even if the rumors ruin her chances of getting married, he will still have Lily by his side. Lily imagines the two of them growing old together and holding hands, promising she will always be there for him. The prota is way too slow. The waifu is dropping all the hints. Faced with that absurd response from his secretary, Hanbin is completely speechless, breaking into a cold sweat of despair. He tries to appeal to her common sense, reminding her of all his dedication to the kingdom just to try and get a single week off. Lily begins to explain that the harder they work, the more their homeland will shine with glory. She goes on to say that if he takes a whole week off, the progress of the entire nation will slow down by that exact same amount. When asked if he understands her logic, he simply replies that he realizes just how much of a patriotic workaholic she is. But the secretary tries to calm him down, saying she perfectly understands how he feels. Giving the young man a glimmer of hope instead of a vacation, she reveals she has prepared a special, delicious meal, but he says he would really just prefer his days off. Hanbin notices a strange smell rising from the plate, and Lily comments that the royal chef put his entire heart into preparing that delicacy. The chef finally uncovers the tray, revealing a bizarre eel pie with several fish heads pointing straight up. The young man is in absolute shock as he stares into the lifeless eyes of those baked fish in the pie. Completely horrified by that bizarre presentation, Hanbin screams in panic for his own life. The cook leaves the room, wheeling the cart away, while Lily calmly says goodbye to him. Once alone, she sighs in relief and reveals to herself that it was all just a prank, as she has already approved his vacation. To make things even better, she is also taking time off to go with him and has already booked a beautiful beach house for the two of them to enjoy together. Lily gets super excited, thinking about how Hanbin will react when he finally discovers this surprise. She slowly opens the door to tell him the news, but finds it strange that his office is completely dark and empty. As she steps inside, she sees the curtains fluttering in the wind and sheets of paper flying all over the room. She missed her chance. The prota just packed up and left on top of the desk. There is only a note from him stating that he has resigned from his post as minister, asking everyone not to look for him. Lily is left speechless and in utter shock by the prota's sudden escape. While the secretary desperately screams his name, Hanbin is already leaping across the city rooftops under the moonlight. He figures Lily will do just fine without him, since she is the smartest and most competent administrator in the kingdom. Although he has improved a lot of things since arriving in this world, there is one thing that still leaves him completely unsatisfied. And his biggest frustration is the terrible culinary culture of this place, filled with ugly and tasteless dishes. Due to the long wars of the past, people only ate for survival, causing the kingdom's cuisine to become dreadful. As a former award-winning food researcher from South Korea that made his blood boil with indignation, he laments that people saw absolutely no issue with those horrible meals, even though he had warned them multiple times. He wanted to take a break to search for some real, tasty food around the country, but since he had to run away, he decided to change his plan. He decides that the time has finally come to turn his big old dream into reality. And here I was thinking his dream was to build a harem. I guess I'm the only one with a dirty mind. Without hesitation, the young man pours the mysterious liquid from the vial directly onto his own hair. A bright, colorful light envelops his body, initiating a true magical transformation. His dark hair quickly changes color, turning completely silver. Even the color of his eyes transforms, completely changing the hero's look. Now, he wears simple server clothes and is fully disguised to avoid being recognized. He vows to himself that he will awaken the curiosity of people all over the world for truly delicious food. 3 months pass, and the young man now appears bored, wiping empty glasses in his new coffee shop. The coffee shop is perfectly organized and decorated, but completely empty, without a single customer in sight. He lets out a discouraged sigh, facing yet another day with absolutely no foot traffic in his establishment. Outside, 2 elderly men passing by on the street comment that it is no surprise the place is so deserted. They recall that it has been 3 months since Jurgen opened the shop in the city of Nortaris, promising a coffee unlike anything that existed before. One of them asks if the other has also tried the drink, and the neighbor complains about a bizarre coffee called espresso. He grumbles that the drink is far too bitter and comes in such a tiny amount that it barely wets your tongue. The other agrees and thinks it is ridiculous that Jurgen is still trying to sell those massive coffee machines to customers. They say the machines are only good for scrap metal, and Jurgen overhears everything from inside the shop, getting furious at the insults. He admits that his grand project of creating a successful coffee shop chain in this world has failed miserably. His plan was to use the bad coffee that already existed there to create better drinks and slowly change people's minds. His mistake was overestimating the palate of the local people, who are far too accustomed to their old, lifelong eating habits. Jurgen realizes that changing the culinary culture of an entire country is much harder than defeating a giant monster. Suddenly, the little bell above the entrance door rings, announcing someone's arrival at the coffee shop. A beautiful young blonde woman in a red dress and an elegant hat enters the place, covering her face with a hand fan. The young man welcomes her warmly and politely asks if she wants him to prepare her usual order. This regular customer is Lady Penelope, a young noblewoman who always visits the coffee shop. She comments disdainfully that the place remains empty and pathetic, but Jurgen points out that she has been coming in every single day lately. Penelope fires back, saying he should feel honored, as she would never step foot in such a rundown place if it weren't for the coffee. With a certain arrogance, she demands that he bring her usual order right away, and Jurgen patiently replies that he will prepare it in a moment. He carefully places the small cup of coffee on her table. The young man watches the lady drink, acknowledging that she is his only customer and the sole reason his business is still open. However, he knows he cannot rely on a single customer forever and begins to wonder if he should just give up on the business. Jurgen stands with his arms crossed, deep in thought, and clearly frustrated with how things are going. But he quickly brushes that negative thought away with determination, refusing to accept defeat. The young man thinks of his secretary, Lily, who is sacrificing herself and dealing with an absurd workload at the palace in his place. He clenches his fist, determined not to let his friend down, since she sacrificed herself so he could chase his big dream. Poor girl, now she is the one who became a corporate slave. Jurgen knows he still has many modern recipes saved up to test and decides to open his special refrigerator. With a determined look, he decides that the time has finally come to take the second step of his grand plan. He takes a large, glowing vial filled with alchemical magic out of the freezer, focusing on his goal. Returning to the main room, Jurgen calls the noble lady by her name, immediately getting her attention. He thanks her for her loyalty and offers a special complimentary drink, inviting her to try it. She asks if it is a new menu item and agrees to taste it, finding his sudden formality a bit amusing. The young man begins pouring the drink into the glass. It was a dark, carbonated beverage. I think we all know what it is by now. Penelope examines the glass in confusion, noting that the color resembles coffee, but the drink is surprisingly ice-cold. Jurgen assures her she will love it, while she playfully asks, suspicious, if he didn't put anything strange inside. With a shrug, the young lady decides to take a generous gulp to taste the liquid. The young man watches her reaction with high expectations, hoping his plan works out instantly. Penelope's mind is blown by the explosion of flavor, and she wonders how this is even possible. Noticing her amazement, Jurgen flashes a highly satisfied smile of victory. She feels that the dark liquid brings an incredibly light and unexpected sensation of freshness. The fizzy carbonation leaves a sweet touch of vanilla in her mouth, going down her chest in a refreshing and electrifying way. To top it off, a subtle hint of lime finishes the experience perfectly, leaving the girl sighing with pleasure. Jurgen realizes he hit the jackpot and asks if she liked it, making the young lady blush with embarrassment and grumble. Very frustrated at having to admit his talent, she confesses that there is truly no denying the quality of the drink. To her, this is undoubtedly the most enigmatic and fascinating drink she has ever tasted in her entire life. She poetically describes the sensation as if she were drinking a beautiful, sweet night sky filled with shining stars. Seeing such a sincere and amazed reaction, the young man is absolutely certain he got what he wanted. He celebrates mentally for finally managing to recreate that world-famous flavor in a completely different world. The young lady insists on asking for the name of the drink and if it really isn't coffee, and he prepares to reveal the answer. With total conviction, the young man knows that this specific creation will bring ultimate success to his cafe. This is the famous drink that sells billions of servings a day on Earth, with pure water being its only real competitor. It is a true global phenomenon that captivated all of humanity, transcending barriers and political ideologies. Going far beyond a simple soda, the product eventually became a massive global trendsetter. The beverage established itself as a cornerstone of modern culture on Earth. Being the absolute king of popular preference, Jurgen triumphantly reveals the name of his great creation, the famous Coca-Cola. She introduces herself in her mind as Penelope Rosemore, the third daughter of a prestigious noble dynasty that has ruled Nortaris for generations. Although she considers it improper for her social standing to frequent such a humble alley, she has been visiting the place regularly over the last 3 months, and the sole reason for all these secret visits is the shop run by the mysterious Jurgen. The first time she walked in out of pure curiosity, she discovered that the coffee served was unbelievably delicious. She was enchanted by the espresso in her small cup, finding the taste unique and incomparable. Besides the striking flavor that balances the intense bitterness, there is an even bigger reason for her to return there every day. And that major secret reason is Jurgen himself, the shop owner, who always treats her incredibly well. She remembers when he smiled gently and complimented her name, leaving the noblewoman completely flustered. Jurgen even teased her, asking her not to frown, warning her that otherwise she would get wrinkles on her beautiful face. Jurgen celebrates upon receiving another great tip and thanks her warmly, saying he hopes to see her again the next day. The young man gets thoughtful when she asks what he thinks of her, trying to find the ideal response. He charmingly suggests that she seems like a unique rose, leaving the girl outraged by such informal behavior. Penelope is furious at the audacity of that commoner to speak to her in such an informal and intimate manner. She reconsiders that her second great reason for frequenting that shop every day is precisely to enforce her noble authority over him. To her, a true noble does not force people to bow, but rather commands natural respect through charisma and dignity. Penelope thinks that revealing her last name directly would be very vulgar, preferring that he notice her nobility on his own through her elegant behavior. She loves to imagine the young man in a panic, full of regret for not recognizing a high-class lady right from the start. In her mind, he would bow down to the ground, begging for forgiveness for committing a terrible offense against his sovereign. Thinking about this whole scene of the server's despair is the most fun part of her daily visits. However, Jurgen breaks her daydream by asking why she always comes in so dressed up and uncomfortable just to have a coffee. This simple question completely shatters the noblewoman's fantasies of superiority, leaving her utterly speechless. Later that night, Penelope relaxes in her luxurious hot tub at home. She gets annoyed, wondering if that merchant already knows her noble identity and is just pretending not to know on purpose. Furious at the possibility of being played for a fool by a mere commoner, she vows that this will not slide. Using her noble power would be way too easy, so she decides she will defeat him at his own game to get more satisfaction. Although his coffee is excellent, she sees a major flaw in the fact that he serves the exact same drink every single day. She plans to deliver an extremely merciless critique the next day to leave him crying with regret. But all that determination goes down the drain when she finally tries his delicious new drink. Completely embarrassed and trembling with emotion, she asks for the name of the beverage, and he calmly replies that it is called cola. The young lady repeats the name of the drink while staring at her empty glass, completely surrendered to that wonderful flavor. Embarrassed by her own reaction, Penelope hesitates for a moment before trying to say something to Jurgen. Blushing intensely, she swallows her pride and shyly begs if she could please have one more glass. Jurgen flashes a wide, subtle smirk upon seeing the noblewoman's pride crumble so easily before his creation. Very kindly, he says warmly that she can drink as many glasses as she wants. At the end of that night, Jurgen walks up the stairs to his workshop, thinking about how well his plan is working. He is impressed by the success of the cola, since the girl ended up asking for no less than 5 refills in a row. He laughs, remembering how she stumbled out of the shop, completely full of soda, muttering the name of the drink non-stop. Thanks to this, he confirms that the flavor pleases any kind of person and plans to spread the news far and wide. The young man dreams of revolutionizing the kingdom, but laments that he cannot do it right now because he lacks enough supplies for mass production. He explains that all the soda served today was created using his advanced material creation alchemy magic. However, the dice-shaped catalyst required for this magic has an astronomical manufacturing cost and yields very little. Since the drink is created by crossing space-time, the final selling price would have to be absurdly expensive just to cover the costs. But since he knows people love the drink, his new goal is to find a way to produce it without spending those magical catalysts. He intends to use all the scientific knowledge from his past life in the modern world to solve this problem. Combining that modern experience with his great alchemist skills from this world, he plans to make something new. The idea is to combine both techniques to manufacture the drink cheaply, using only common ingredients from this fantasy world. With the plan laid out, Jurgen stretches and decides that the first logical step will be to gather the necessary ingredients. The search leads him to the southern continent, in a dense and wild tropical rainforest region called the Soltera Protectorate deep in the woods. There is a large wooden estate that serves as a hideout for the Montegra cartel. The muscular leader in a floral shirt asks if that man is the eccentric who came to negotiate directly with his organization. Standing before him is Jurgen, wearing an elegant purple cape and a white rabbit mask to hide his identity. The boss finds it strange that he traveled from so far away just to look for ingredients, since Jurgen's homeland has plenty of resources. Behind his disguise, the young man only displays a mysterious and highly confident smile. Jurgen agrees that his land is rich, but explains there is a very specific ingredient he can only find in that forest. Cutting straight to the chase, he reveals that the product he is looking for is the rare coca leaves. The cartel boss looks visibly surprised and tense upon hearing the name of that forbidden plant. He comments that the young man is crazy to call that an ingredient instead of a substance, but says he doesn't care what use they will give to the plant. Being a good businessman, the boss asks Jurgen to state what price he is willing to pay for that merchandise. Jurgen points his index finger and, with a lot of nerve, proposes to buy the leaves for just 1 copper coin per ton. The cartel leader almost falls backward in surprise at the audacity of that ridiculous offer. The henchmen burst out laughing, calling the young man crazy and sarcastically saying he should have just asked for the leaves for free. The boss simply raises his hand, and instantly the gang of criminals goes serious and silent. He stares at Jurgen and seriously questions if that proposal makes any sense for a business deal. Jurgen responds with a calm smile that this is the ideal price to be paid to criminals infesting the kingdom. The cartel leader's gaze turns extremely dangerous and irritated at that direct provocation. Annoyed at wasting time, he orders them to strip the invader of everything and throw his body to the gators in the lake. One of the henchmen steps forward with a sword, mocking the situation and commenting that the gators will have a hard time chewing. He leaps to attack Jurgen, saying it's better to slice him into tiny pieces first to make things easier. In the blink of an eye, the masked invader knocks the attacker down with a swift and devastating blow, sending him straight to the ground. The gang leader is completely flabbergasted, left open-mouthed as he sees his henchmen defeated so easily. The henchmen panic, realizing that this mysterious masked man is far from being an ordinary noble. Even though they are scared, they try to organize in larger numbers to surround Jurgen from all sides calmly. Jurgen simply crosses his arms and summons his glowing magical material creation, Dye. He uses the creation magic to conjure the gravity element directly through the catalyst. A massive barrier of green energy explodes around him, affecting the entire room with an overwhelming pressure. The spell is so powerful that it encompasses the entire structure of the estate in the middle of the jungle. The magical barrier glows intensely, sealing the place completely with an incredible amount of energy. Desperate, the henchmen scream without understanding what is happening, asking what he has done to them. They begin to float uncontrollably through the air, realizing their bodies have completely lost all weight. Jurgen controls the magical flow smoothly, while keeping all the criminals floating helplessly against the ceiling. One of the henchmen screams in terror as he finds himself floating upside down with nothing he can do to escape. The spell is so absurd that it makes the entire estate lift off the ground and float in the sky like an island. The cartel boss begs him to stop and demands to know why he is attacking the group so brutally. Jurgen coldly repeats that he only wants the coca leaves to extract the essential ingredient for his perfect soda recipe. Trembling with fear, the leader asks what kind of recipe requires something like that. With such urgency, Jurgen simply makes a shushing gesture and replies mockingly that it is an absolute secret. Meanwhile, back in the city of Nortaris, Penelope goes to Jurgen's shop, anxious to have her soda. However, she is met with a very large sign on the door warning that the establishment is closed for vacation. The young noblewoman stands frozen. With a shadow of disappointment and anger clouding her face, she falls into despair and screams in anger, frustrated at having gone all the way there for nothing and not being able to have her beloved cola today. Angry at having her time wasted, she vows she will never forgive him if she finds out he traveled for any reason other than the drink far away from there, in the tropical jungle. Jurgen continues to control his massive magical gravity sphere with total ease. The immense wooden mansion remains suspended in the air under the effect of the gravitational spell. Suddenly, the green energy bubble begins to contract extremely violently. With the sudden increase in gravity, the entire structure is hurled back to the ground at high speed, making the criminals scream. The estate crashes down destructively in the middle of the forest, generating a devastating impact that destroys everything around it. From the top of a cliff, Jurgen watches the smoke rising from the ruins of the enemy base, which was completely destroyed. He warns the tied-up criminals that this serves as a warning and that they should be grateful he spared their lives. However, the young man notices something strange and lets out a murmur of doubt as he looks at the group of prisoners. He realizes that the cartel leader, Ropo, is not among the tied-up men and wonders if he messed up the control of his magic. But soon Jurgen notices a suspicious bush moving and realizes the boss is trying to sneak away like a rat. Running desperately through the forest, the boss screams in outrage that this isn't cowardice, but rather a strategy of pure survival. Jurgen just stands there with a drop of sweat on his head, watching the desperate escape of that man who seemed so tough before. The young man warns him that their business isn't finished yet and asks if he really thought he could escape so easily. Meanwhile, the scene shifts back to the luxurious royal palace of Britannia on a sunny day. In the meeting room, Lily listens intently to a report about the rise of the Montegra cartel. The informant explains that the faction has been growing rapidly in the south, bringing serious problems that the local government is unable to solve. He details that the gang is led by Ropo, a brutal fifth-class knight who easily defeated the task force sent to stop him. Lily agrees on the difficulty of the mission, recalling that the combat strength of a fifth-class knight matches the destructive power of a military tank. The dangerous criminal desperately tries to escape amidst the devastating explosions of the area. Ropo terrifiedly realizes that the power of the mysterious masked opponent goes far beyond any ordinary military tank. At the palace, the officer warns that sending troops into the jungle would be terrible, as casualties against a knight of that caliber would be massive. However, the cartel leader himself is already suffering from the massive wind of Jurgen's gravitational spell. He screams in despair as he is violently pulled toward the ground by the crushing force of the magic. Lily questions if the Algund Empire is secretly backing the criminals, and the informant says there are suspicions, but they still lack proof. She knows that using military force on the border with the rival empire would violate the peace treaty and cause a serious diplomatic crisis. In the jungle, Ropo desperately cries for help as giant trees come crashing down around him. Although the situation is tense, she decides that for now, the best option is to monitor everything closely to avoid losing control of the protectorate. The officer calls her minister, but Lily makes sure to correct him, saying she is only the acting minister for now. She seriously confesses that she is merely keeping the seat warm until Lord Hanbin finally returns to the palace. After receiving his superior's orders, the informant politely excuses himself and leaves the meeting room. Left alone, she whispers Hanbin's name with a melancholic look, deeply missing his presence. She thinks that if he were there, he would know exactly what to do, feeling the heavy weight of the void he left behind. Worried, the young lady clasps her hands in a silent prayer, wondering where her hero is and what he is doing. In the jungle, Jurgen finally catches up with Ropo and mockingly comments that he has finally given up on running. He lands imposingly right in front of the criminal, completely cornering him against the trees. Ropo begs, saying he doesn't even know him and asks what he has against the cartel, but Jurgen assures him it is nothing personal. Crying, the brute complains that it is hard to make a living with a monster like him around and begs to be spared just this once. Jurgen ironically points out that he rules the entire Montegra region, and the villain fires back, saying that compared to the young man's power, he is just a street vendor. The boss offers to hand over all the coca leaves and anything else if Jurgen just spares his life, catching the young man's attention. However, behind that pathetic act of begging for mercy, a treacherous smile appears on the criminal's face. He plans to draw Jurgen close to launch a surprise attack with the dagger he stealthily hid on the ground. The villain thinks that no matter how powerful the young man is, he is still just a fragile alchemist mage in close combat. He is certain that Jurgen won't stand a chance against a surprise strike from a knight with a physical build trained to the absolute limit. In a split second, Ropo lunges forward with fury, trying to drive his weapon into the masked opponent, but the villain misses the blow completely and hits only thin air, left dumbfounded as he realizes the target vanished from in front of him. The cartel leader is completely paralyzed and breaking into a cold sweat as he feels a sudden, intimidating weight on top of his head. Jurgen simply dodged with extreme ease and is now standing right on top of the villain's own head. Next, the young man applies a crushing gravitational force that violently hurls the boss against the ground, buried in the dirt up to his neck and unable to move. Ropo is completely dizzy and unable to react. Jurgen kneels in front of him peacefully and presents a business contract, asking the boss to sign the document immediately. With no way to escape, the villain stares at the paper with hatred and growls in anger against his captor. Ropo complains that the document is full of abusive clauses and questions his conscience, but Jurgen fires back, saying that criminals have no right to speak of such things. He complains that paying fair wages to the farmers and selling the harvest almost for free would mean instant bankruptcy, refusing to sign. Coldly, Jurgen questions why the only alternative the criminal can think of is always exploiting the poor local workers. He simply suggests that the gang of henchmen itself start planting and cultivating the land, since they have plenty of manpower available. Proud, the boss revolts at the idea of turning criminals into farmers, and screams that he would rather pass away than humble himself, to that Jurgen just stares at him in silence for a moment, sighing at such foolishness and stubbornness. With a dangerous look, the young man begins to conjure a massive sphere of concentrated gravity and warns that he is going to make things very clear between them. The dark energy expands in a terrifying way over the masked young man's head, absolutely terrifying Ropo. He fires the devastating gravitational spell with full force right next to where the criminal is trapped. The explosion shatters the ground and rocks inches away from the villain, leaving him in absolute panic at such destructive power. Jurgen keeps a magical protection barrier active so that the debris doesn't hit them during the demonstration of force. He coldly threatens that if the villain breaks the contract or runs away, he will be hunted down everywhere and today's suffering will repeat. The dark smoke and debris around them prove that the young man is not joking at all with that terrifying threat. Completely terrified and crying, Ropo finally agrees to sign everything, and Jurgen celebrates the great business deal closed later that night at the Imperial Palace of Britannia. A messenger rushes into the official office. He hastily corrects Lily's title and delivers an urgent report coming straight from the Solterra Protectorate. The messenger screams in shock that the feared Montegra cartel has just voluntarily disbanded out of nowhere, leaving the acting minister confused. Lily is left in total shock upon reading that all the criminals in the cartel suddenly decided to become farmers. With this agreement, Jurgen celebrates that the hardest part of securing the supply of coca leaves has finally been resolved. The young man knows he still has to go through the laborious process of removing the mind-altering properties and extracting only the flavor, but he has secured enough raw material to produce thousands of bottles of cola, feeling less guilty about abandoning his post as minister. Even so, Jurgen knows he can't just steal everything he needs and decides to legally buy the rest of the ingredients he needs to get sugar and various spices, so he decides to open his safe to check how much money he still has stored away. To his disappointment, the young man realizes there is absolutely nothing left and that his current funds are completely wiped out. Asking for a loan is out of the question, since he wiped his old identity clean and now has no line of credit at the bank. Jurgen decides that manual labor is the best way out and prepares to search for resources in the labyrinth territory of Nortaris. Meanwhile, Penelope walks toward Jurgen's shop, wearing a beautiful red dress and an elegant hat. The girl is highly irritated because she has been making this walk for days for nothing, and her patience with his disappearance is running thin. She wonders what is so special about that cola and complains about Jurgen so coldly ignoring his only loyal customer. Suddenly, Penelope begins to suspect that he might have fled in the middle of the night with all his bags without telling anyone. She recalls that she never saw another customer there and thinks that, for a broke merchant with overdue rent, running away would be expected. The young lady panics at the thought that, if he really is gone, she will never be able to drink his delicious cola or coffee again. She laments that he didn't say anything, because if the situation was that bad, she could have lent him the rent money herself. Penelope soon remembers an important little detail. The young man doesn't even know she is the daughter of a very influential count. She regrets not revealing her identity sooner, right at the moment when Jurgen opens the door wearing a massive backpack. Penelope's eyes widen, and she is left in complete shock as she sees the young man right in front of her, dressed as an explorer. Jurgen walks out of the shop very calmly, carrying a giant backpack on his back and a rope hanging from his waist. The noblewoman begins to tremble with anger, thinking that he wasn't fleeing in the middle of the night, but rather in broad daylight. Jurgen greets her friendlily, but she immediately orders him with a serious look to put that travel backpack on the ground. She screams furiously that he is absolutely not allowed to leave until he delivers her beloved cola. After all the initial commotion, Jurgen serves a hot cup to calm the girl down inside the establishment sitting at the table. Penelope says she finally understands the tragic situation, that he is out of cola stock and out of ingredients. She holds her cup with her hands trembling from pure frustration, while Jurgen just watches, looking a bit awkward. Penelope downs the drink all at once and grumbles about having waited all these days, leaving the young man surprised to learn she came by every day. She furiously denies it and says she wasn't waiting for him, making the young man question why she is suddenly so angry. Penelope asks where he is going to get the ingredients, since he has no money, and he replies that he is going to look for them in the labyrinth of Nortaris. She asks if he has lost his mind and questions him if he even knows on which floor of the labyrinth the spices are located. Jurgen keeps a highly confident smile on his face at her question about his journey. The young man calmly explains that most of the spices he needs can be found right on the 4th floor of the labyrinth. Penelope admits he did his research well, but warns that the labyrinth is still dangerous, even after the great monster subjugation. She explains that the safety is only for adventurers, and that an ordinary merchant running around there alone would easily be eaten alive. Furthermore, she points out that to enter from the 4th floor onward, a permit issued by the guild or the merchant union is required. To pass through there freely, a person strictly needs a silver tier permit or higher. She comments that if a civilian gets into trouble in there, the rescue team will have a hard time, making Jurgen sigh worriedly. Jurgen questions in surprise why a permit is needed just to hunt monsters, and she realizes he didn't know any of this. The girl comments that, in the past, they even paid people to go there, but says that times have definitely changed a lot. Suddenly, an idea sparks in Penelope's mind, and she realizes that this situation might be the perfect opportunity she wanted. She thinks that if she helps Jurgen collect the necessary ingredients for the cola, she can take great advantage of it. The young lady imagines that this help would give her the perfect reason to demand her beloved drinks for free, and whenever she wants. And best of all, it would be the ideal chance to show off all her competence to this man who seems to be so naive and clueless. Penelope proudly clears her throat and warns that the silver tier pass is only given to truly highly experienced adventurers. She adds that nobles also receive this pass as a special privilege, while she begins to pull hers out of her pocket. With a victorious smile, she reveals that the highly coveted entry permit is right there in her hands. At that very moment, Penelope displays her brilliant emerald pass and proudly says it allows her to bring up to 3 companions into the labyrinth. Jurgen is left mouth agape at the shine of that special pass, and she brags, asking if he is finally impressed. She thinks that such benefits are not given to just anyone, certain that the merchant has now figured out her true background. Holding the object carefully, Jurgen admits in surprise that he had no idea Penelope possessed something so valuable. Posing grandly, Penelope asks if he is an alchemist, or if he happens to be a highly skilled adventurer. Jurgen is outraged, wondering how on earth she came to that conclusion, but the girl quickly deduces he must be a knight. Shortly after, the two arrive at the majestic Ridgefield Mana Gate to begin their official journey. Jurgen waits patiently in the station lobby, carrying his massive backpack while people pass by around him. Penelope appears behind him and comments that he managed to make it to the scheduled meeting point just fine. The young lady is now wearing a very flashy red explorer outfit, perfect for walking in the labyrinth. The young man stares at her, completely dumbfounded by the sudden change in style, while she looks at him with gravity. She questions why he is staring so much, and Jurgen replies that he just found the outfit very different from her usual one. Penelope asks if he really thought she would enter a labyrinth in a dress, warning him that she is only there as a guide. She reminds him that the deal is to get him safely to the 4th floor in exchange for receiving the first bottles of finished cola next. They join the line on the platform to present the necessary documentation to the guard on duty. Penelope proudly shows her emerald pass, leaving the guard in the booth quite surprised. With their passage cleared, the two head toward the glowing magic circles drawn on the wooden floor. Jurgen comments that the place looks a lot like an airport VIP lounge, leaving Penelope completely confused by the terms. He brushes it off, saying it was just an expression from his homeland, and she tells him to stop pretending he knows everything. Jurgen silently remembers the time when he used to walk through that dangerous labyrinth as if it were his own backyard. Since taking office as minister, he had never been back, so now he feels a great sense of homecoming. The two position themselves in the center of the teleportation circle and wait for the magic to begin activating around them. With a strong glow of bluish energy, they are instantly sent into the dark interior of the caverns. Opening his eyes in the new setting, Jurgen lets out a sigh of pure surprise at what he sees around him. Penelope calls him to move forward, while the young man stays behind. Observing the details of that underground structure, she tells him not to wander off and to follow the light poles, leaving the young man confused by the presence of street lighting there. In the past, the place was just a suffocating environment, full of dark stone walls and without any point of reference. The danger of being attacked by terrifying monsters at any moment made that place a nightmare for explorers. But the girl comments that things have changed quite a bit nowadays, and calmly points the way to the left. Jurgen is completely shocked, his mouth wide open, upon realizing that they have even put up directional signs in the labyrinth. The young man asks if they shouldn't watch out for traps, but she says the guild already cleared the entire first floor years ago. Seeing so many modern changes, Jurgen thinks to himself that this place now looks more like a themed amusement park. Penelope proudly explains that they blasted a huge hole in the labyrinth wall to create a quick shortcut to their goal. She warns that an ordinary civilian is still in great danger if they let their guard down, because even though the guild removed the traps, the monsters remain. The noblewoman seriously points out that the authorities have no way of controlling where wild creatures will pop up along the way. Suddenly, two glowing red eyes emerge from the darkness right ahead of the duo, catching their attention. A dark, stingray-shaped creature appears, floating and emitting a mysterious and threatening purple aura in the tunnel. Without hesitation, Penelope quickly pulls out a few vials of alchemical catalysts to prepare for the imminent combat. The monster slowly flies through the air, closing in on the duo, who watch it closely from below. Penelope gets a bit tense, seeing the creature so close, and anxiously whispers that it really is a monster. She recalls that the creature is called a labyrinth stingray, a parasite that becomes as weak as a wild dog when it has no host. Despite having studied the subject well, this is the first time she has faced such a monster face-to-face in her life. She remembers that this is only her 4th journey, and that on the other occasions, she was always fully protected by experienced warriors. However, she vows to herself that she must absolutely not let Jurgen find out that she has never actually fought before. Trusting her title as a 4th-class alchemist, she relies on the various catalyst vials she brought with her. Penelope fakes disdain as she says it is just a weak disruption-class creature and tells Jurgen to focus only on protecting the luggage. The floating monster lunges at high speed in her direction, ready to start the physical clash in the dark tunnel. With a determined look, she tells her companion to get ready to be completely amazed by her brilliant magic. She throws her catalyst vials and conjures a spell of homing arrows toward the approaching target. However, right after, the girl stands completely still with a puzzled face, not quite understanding what just happened. Suddenly, the monster is struck and taken down by a surprise attack coming from another direction, exploding into magical smoke in the air. A voice from the darkness apologizes for the intrusion, revealing they shot because they thought the two were in danger. 3 well-armed warriors approach, and the man in the front asks if they are all right, or if they ended up getting hurt in the attack. Jurgen analyzes them in silence and notices that, despite their simple appearance, the trio of adventurers seems to consist of veterans. The blonde-haired man bows politely and introduces himself as Ethan, the vanguard of that adventurer group. Penelope simply ignores him, saying she didn't ask anything, and tells Jurgen to keep moving because they have a long way to go. Ethan tries to persist, saying the place is more dangerous than she thinks, but the noblewoman coldly responds that she already said she is not interested. Jurgen is surprised by the guy's tremendous persistence. Since most normal people would back off in embarrassment after such a rejection, the blonde fellow suggests it would be much better to travel with reliable adventurers than with a carrier who looks so goofy. Ethan proudly displays his silver tier pass, but Penelope stops walking suddenly and calls him a mere commoner. She makes it clear that she can handle herself perfectly fine alone and that she doesn't need any pathetic help from a commoner like him. With a terrifying and furious look, the young lady orders in a threatening tone for the adventurer to get lost immediately. The warrior is left completely terrified and speechless, while Jurgen just watches from afar with a slight smirk. The blonde fellow decides to leave, grumbling that it was a shame, ironically wishing the two a great trip. However, Jurgen notices that the group plans to follow them secretly and stays highly alert to their movements. Jurgen comments softly that she might have rejected the men too hostilely, but she doesn't seem to care. He explains that not every adventurer around there has good intentions and says that, while caution is good, it's not wise to make enemies for no reason. Losing patience with his advice, Penelope simply stomps hard on Jurgen's foot to make him shut up. She complains that he has no backbone for accepting being insulted to his face, and called a goofy carrier without reacting. Jurgen smiles and thanks her, finding it cute that she was angry to defend him, but Penelope loudly denies it, turning completely red. She justifies it by saying she only got annoyed seeing a creepy guy like that trying to take advantage of them. The duo continues their silent walk, crossing an ancient suspended stone bridge inside the dark cavern. They finally reach the entrance that gives direct access to the 3rd floor of the massive labyrinth territory. Looking at the watch on his wrist, Jurgen gets startled upon realizing that night has already fallen and that time flew by. He warns that it is already midnight and suggests they camp to rest, leaving entering the 4th floor for the next day. Penelope anxiously asks if there is any shelter nearby, but Jurgen says the nearest refuge is a 2-hour walk away. The young man tells her to sit on a rock and relax while he handles setting up the entire campsite. To the young man's surprise, the girl accepts very meekly and silently. Sitting exactly where he indicated, Jurgen confesses that he expected a huge fuss from her about having to sleep on the hard ground, but she remains quiet. In reality, Penelope is sitting hugging her knees with a very sad and melancholic expression on her face. She begins to silently blame herself internally for everything that is happening to them on this journey. She regrets walking in circles looking for a monster just to show off, because if it weren't for that, they would already be in the safe shelter. Since it is her first time camping in the wild, she fears getting a backache and worries about the night watch rotation. The young lady feels terrible for dragging Jurgen into this mess in the middle of nowhere just to get a simple bottle of cola. She trembles imagining the scolding she would get from her noble family if they discovered she was sleeping on a cave floor. Penelope recalls her father's stern words about the responsibility of the nobility to bear the consequences when their servants suffer. Her father teaches that compensating servants with gifts or bonuses for their efforts is what the concept of nobility truly means. She agrees with herself that she needs to give Jurgen a fair reward, but is interrupted by a sound coming from behind. Looking to the side, she is completely open-mouthed to see that Jurgen has already set up an impeccable tent and prepared a warm campfire. She comments in surprise that he seems very experienced with camping, and the young man responds with a nice smile that he has done this many times. Next, Jurgen hands her a dark blanket to cover herself and stay warm from the cold wind blowing through the underground caverns. Penelope complains a bit about the smell of the fabric, but Jurgen explains that in damp places, what matters is thermal insulation and utility. The young man winks in a friendly way and wisely states that the practical utility of an item must always come before its price tag. Penelope stares at him deeply for a moment and ends up letting slip a slight, sincere smile of admiration. She promises she will buy a much better blanket for him when they get out of there, and the young man accepts, laughing as he stirs the food in the pot. He presents the dish as highly caloric potato pancakes and explains that this meal will guarantee plenty of energy for the next day. Penelope thinks the smell is great, but finds the appearance very simple and greasy before taking her first bite. As soon as she puts the first piece in her mouth and bites down, she closes her eyes, feeling an indescribable crunchiness take over her palate. She delights in the crispy yet soft texture of the shredded potato strips that seem to melt perfectly in her mouth. The young lady is amazed by that rich flavor and wonders if this is really made from the same ordinary potato she eats every day. Just as the simple potato taste begins to settle, a subtle, refreshing aroma of fine herbs emerges to complete the dish. Penelope begins to eat desperately, unable to stop, and Jurgen offers a hot cup of chamomile tea to go with it. With her mouth full, she asks what spell he used on the food, and Jurgen simply reveals that he just fried them with lard and butter. She is astonished to learn that the big secret was just using good quality butter, and Jurgen laughs, asking if the food is good. Penelope tries to maintain her noble posture and says the food isn't half bad, but her face quickly gives her away. The expression on her face makes it very clear to Jurgen that the meal would be absolutely perfect if it were accompanied by an ice-cold cola. Shortly after, the pots and plates from the campsite are already completely clean and empty. The girl sleeps peacefully inside the tent, utterly exhausted and with a full stomach after the beautiful meal. Jurgen notices that she fell asleep instantly and laughs, concluding that sharing the night watch shift is completely out of the question. She asks to be woken up in 3 hours, but the young man decides to let her sleep, knowing that the journey must be exhausting for a noble. He stretches near the fire and thinks that she followed him there out of pure stubbornness, preparing himself for a long night watch. The young man pours a very hot cup of the tea he prepared over the campfire and drinks it calmly to pass the time. Facing away from the darkness, he comments that having tea there has a special charm and invites the hidden pursuers to join him. Jurgen reveals he already knew they were following him and tells the guys to stop freezing in the dark and come warm themselves by the fire. The 3 adventurers from before emerge from the shadows with mischievous smiles and weapons drawn to corner the young man. Ethan points his crossbow and says that lighting a fire in the middle of the labyrinth proves he has no survival instinct and is asking to pass away. The blonde warrior arrogantly questions if the young man is just completely foolish for doing something like that. In this place, Jurgen remains calm with a slight smile on his face and says he wonders which of the 2 options would be correct, leaving Ethan confused. The brute of the group steps up right behind and throws a pair of cuffs on the ground, telling Jurgen to stop acting tough and put them on the girl. He threatens to shoot the young man in the forehead if he tries any funny business, promising to spare his life only if he cooperates without resisting. Jurgen picks up the item and comments that they don't seem like ordinary adventurers, and Ethan challenges him to stay calm after seeing their secret. Ethan rolls up his sleeve, revealing a viper tattoo, and proudly announces that they belong to the feared Pitch Black gang. The blonde warrior boasts that his criminal organization claims the entire 5th floor of the labyrinth as their personal territory. He adds that even veteran adventurers avoid them and that a measly, goofy carrier like Jurgen is no match for them. The villain smirks and warns him to behave once and for all, so things don't get ugly or painful. Looking closely at the shiny metal collar in his hands, Jurgen thoughtfully comments that it has been a long time since he last saw something like this. He recognizes the object as mana cuffs and questions their plan, and Ethan responds that first they are going to pay back the previous humiliation. He reveals that they plan to rob the 2 of them of everything, make them beg on their knees for mercy, and then sell them as slaves for a good price. Jurgen points out that they seem very experienced in this, while the other bandit warns that everything will be easier if he cooperates quietly with a serious and cold look. The silver-haired young man asks if there is absolutely no chance they could just let him pass in peace. The sudden coldness in the young man's words makes Ethan break into a cold sweat for a brief moment, feeling a strange shiver run down his spine. The brute bursts out laughing and asks if he's gone crazy, reminding him that they chased them all day and aren't leaving empty-handed. Ethan gets increasingly tense, noticing the extreme calmness of the young man, and begins to suspect if he really is just a simple carrier. But he quickly brushes the thought aside, reasoning that even if the girl wakes up to fight, the three brutes could easily defeat her. The blonde calms down, thinking that even a child armed with a crossbow would be able to defeat a completely unprepared alchemist. Ethan is certain his homing bolt won't miss, but Jurgen coldly interrupts him, saying the group got it all wrong. Jurgen begins to release an intense blue magical energy, and warningly reveals that he is definitely not a carrier. With his eyes glowing dangerously, the young man reveals that, in reality, his true occupation is being a gardener. Ethan is shocked as he feels the pressure in the air suddenly shift, while the young man calmly handles the pair of metal cuffs staring coldly at the three criminals. Jurgen states that, from his point of view, they are just dangerous weeds. The mace-wielding bandit doesn't get the talk and suggests to the boss to finish him off quickly, thinking the boy is just buying time for the noblewoman to wake up. But before the brute can react, Jurgen lunges forward and violently slams the metal cuff directly into the opponent's mouth. The man falls bleeding to the ground under the terrified gaze of his partners, while the silver-haired young man apologizes for what happened. Jurgen ironically says that he got so scared his legs shook and his hand ended up slipping when securing the object. Completely desperate and panicking, Ethan begins firing his crossbow as fast as he can in his opponent's direction. The gang's mage also enrages and conjures several floating fireballs at once to launch at Jurgen. Even with bolts and flames flying at high speed toward him, Jurgen remains standing, completely serene and showing no reaction. He simply uses his gravitational magic to crush and neutralize all the projectiles in midair before they even get close to him. Seeing their entire arsenal destroyed as if it were nothing, the remaining two criminals freeze in absolute panic. Jurgen unzips his magical backpack and laughingly comments that his loyal partner also seems excited to play after so long. A terrifying purple smoke begins to pour out of the accessory, revealing a massive, glowing red eye inside. The young man caresses the monster's clasp and promises to give his companion a very tasty treat as soon as he finishes the job. Ethan feels a terrible shiver run through his entire body and desperately screams to himself that this guy is way too dangerous. The villain panics, concluding that he is no ordinary adventurer, and wonders if Jurgen is an exterminator sent by the Merchant Guild. Ethan desperately realizes they should have never crossed paths with that man and screams with all his might for the gang to run. The blonde spins around quickly in a desperate attempt to escape that place alive as fast as possible, but a thick purple smoke begins to wrap around the feet of the entire criminal group, preventing them from taking a single step. The three of them are left floating in the air, surrounded by dozens of red eyes that emerge from the darkness. Watching them in a macabre way, Ethan begins to groan in agony as bizarre little red eyes start to form inside his own pupil. Completely paralyzed in the middle of that mysterious mist, the blonde fellow is consumed by terrifying visions of red eyes. The gang's mage lets out screams of terror and despair as he feels the mysterious eyeballs appearing even inside his mouth. Ethan holds his head with both hands in despair, screaming in pain as his mind is mercilessly tortured. He begins to lose his breath and his sanity as he feels the bizarre eyes spreading directly inside his own brain. The criminals scream desperately that there are eyes inside their skulls and brains, completely losing control of their minds. Unable to withstand the terrible mental pressure, the leader of the group collapses to his knees on the damp cave floor, letting out a weak groan. The swordsman raises his arms in a trance and begins to praise a dark entity that rules over all the greed in the world. The mage insanely praises a supposed devouring mother, screaming in ecstasy that he repents and wishes to fully merge with her. Ethan begins to bleed from his eyes and nose, while smiling like a madman, screaming that he is a horrible and filthy creature, with open arms before a massive, illusory red eye. He begs to have his own eyes torn out in sacrifice. Once the dust and mist completely settle, it is revealed that the three criminals have simply vanished without a trace. Jurgen observes the silence of the place and thinks to himself that those men must have carried a great deal of evil in their hearts. In reality, his magical backpack simply executed the verdict, as the criminals were crushed by the overwhelming weight of their own sins. Luckily, Penelope remains sound asleep, not even noticing all the noise of that terrible battle that happened right next to her. Suddenly, Jurgen feels a strange movement behind his back and spins his head quickly to see what it is. From inside the magical bag, the friendly floating head of Weiss emerges, extending toward the young man via a long tentacle. The small creature demands its treat, calling Jurgen by his real name, and the young man remembers he almost forgot his promise. But before giving the prize, he scolds Weiss and demands that the creature call him Jurgen from now on, not Hanbin. Jurgen puts a very colorful and sweet lollipop into Weiss's mouth, who enjoys it happily with a satisfied look. He asks if the job was hard, and the creature replies that it just hates bad guys, commenting that its master hasn't changed a bit. The young man asks that until they leave the labyrinth. The creature continues scaring the monsters the same way it has been doing along the way. Very obedient and happy with its sweet lollipop, Weiss strikes a funny pose and immediately accepts the order given by Jurgen. The young man signals for the creature to go back to its hiding spot, and Weiss smoothly slides back inside the magical backpack once more. However, the little monster suddenly stops with a fixed gaze, making Jurgen turn around to ask if it wants to say anything else. Weiss discreetly points to the tent where Penelope is sleeping and curiously asks if Hanbin likes that girl. The blonde noblewoman continues resting peacefully in the tent, with a very calm and relaxed expression in her deep sleep. Jurgen casts a highly serious and silent look toward his small partner at such an intrusive question. Finally, he just gives a slight smile and warns Weiss that one should not refer to a human being in such a rude manner.